Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us to take a special look at what our restoration teams are doing in the Gulf of Mexico. My name is Erin Spencer, and I am the Communications Manager for the Mesophotic and Deep benthic Communities portfolio, and I will be your host today. Uh, we will get to talk to some of our friends on board a ship called the OSV Island Intervention, a 394-foot ship located about 132 miles off the coast of Galveston, Texas. They're at a place called Bright Bank, located in the Flower Garden Banks National Marine Sanctuary, the only national marine sanctuary in the Gulf of Mexico. We are so excited to have you here to see what it's like on the ship for the last couple of days, or in this case, the last couple of weeks, where they've been conducting important science and restoration work. Today, we'll be taking a deep dive into ROVs, or remotely operated vehicles, tools that are critical for conducting work in these depths. So please share any questions or comments that you have in the chat. I will pause for questions and make sure it gets to the team as we go. So in just a few minutes, we are going to connect with the folks on board. But first, I want to talk a little bit about why they're out there and what they're doing. So let's check out what's underwater in the Gulf of Mexico. As you go deeper into the ocean, like this underwater robot you see here, or the remotely operated vehicle, or ROV, less and less sunlight is able to penetrate the water. Eventually, you will reach the mesophotic zone, which literally means middle light, and is sometimes referred to as the Twilight zone. As you travel even deeper, you will eventually reach a point where there is no sunlight at all. And in addition to this change of light, the water will also get much colder and there's a much higher pressure at those depths. But despite the low light, cold temperatures, and high pressure environment, there's an incredible ecosystem that calls the seafloor and these depths home. You see colorful corals and sponges, which are the foundation of these ecosystems, and they provide habitat for many of the fish and invertebrates you see here. These deep sea ecosystems are found all over the world, including in the Gulf of Mexico, which is where all this beautiful footage that you're seeing right now is actually from. There is so much that we still have to learn about the deep sea because exploring these depths can be difficult and requires help from expensive and highly technical equipment, some of which we're going to learn more about from the science team today on board. However, what we do know is the deep sea is the largest habitat on Earth, and the number of species and the abundance of life that depends on the deep sea habitats may actually rival the colorful coral reefs found in shallow coastal waters or even the tropical rainforests on land. Unfortunately, the Deepwater Horizon oil spill that occurred in April 2010 dealt a heavy blow to these Gulf of Mexico communities on land and at sea. 11 people lost their lives, and natural resources, wildlife, and habitats across the northern Gulf were severely impacted. Restoration is particularly challenging for the deep sea coral habitats that were injured because of how far they are from shore and how far underwater these ecosystems are. So there's a lot that we still have to learn about them. And as a result, following the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, 4 restoration projects are currently underway within the Gulf of Mexico to look at these restoration of the seafloor at ecosystems below 160 feet. The 4 projects are: first, mapping new areas and developing better maps of the seafloor in the Gulf so we know where exactly these coral habitats are found. Second, learning more about the species that live in these habitats and how they might be connected across the Gulf of Mexico. Third, testing different methods to help corals grow and reproduce in the wild and in labs in order to help replace the corals impacted by the oil spill. And finally, working to reduce the threats that these ecosystems face and connecting this restoration work to the public. This work is made possible by the Deepwater Horizon Open Ocean Trustees and a number of partners, including a large number of academic institutions and non-governmental organizations, and the 3 main federal partners: the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, the U.S. Geological Survey, and the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. Now, there are a lot of projects going on in the Gulf, but this particular project is really interesting and special because it's one of the first significant NOAA-Navy collaborations in the Gulf of Mexico. It represents the deepest dive by humans for a NOAA science and restoration mission, and is one of just a handful of times that saturation diving has been used at sea for a NOAA mission. So enough from me. I'm being boring here on land. Let's get to the ship and meet some of the folks that are currently at sea. Okay, great. Hi. Thank you all so much for joining us. I know that you guys are busy running these operations all day, but I'm so excited that you're going to get to share some with our viewers here. So first, before we get into the nitty gritty, would you mind going around and introducing yourself? I know that there's a lot of different jobs on board, so if you could not only introduce ourselves, but tell us a little bit about your role specifically in this mission.
Hi, I'm Jake. I'm the ROV guy. We are here to support NOAA and the Navy in any kind of operations in sampling and collecting things subsea that they need, and in some of the deeper water that the divers can't get to.
Hi, everyone. My name's Kelly Martin. I'm a project manager for NOAA and also one of the co-field party chiefs for this mission. So dealt with a lot of the planning and now execution of this mission. So excited to share what we're working on with y'all.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kyler Sloan, and I'm a PhD student at UNCW. And I'm looking at a couple of species of corals and seeing what types of food that they might be eating to help them grow in the future.
Hey everybody, I'm Megan Laufer. I'm also a student at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. I'm a master's student here. So on this cruise, I'm going to be collecting ROV data to evaluate trends in benthic abundance. So we're looking at, like you said, those habitat forming corals and sponges, how they differ across depth gradients, and also what food is available in the water near those communities.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. I'm going to jump in with a couple of questions to get us started. But if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. And I want to start actually with Jake, because being an ROV pilot, that is not a job that many of us run into on a day-to-day basis. So Jake, could you tell us how you became an ROV pilot and what it's like to be kind of behind that joystick using such an amazing piece of technology?
Yeah, it's a really interesting field of work. I got into it. I was a saturation diver, like your Navy guys, and I was on the commercial end, not with the Navy. And the company that I worked for at the time, they bought the very first 2 shilling ROVs that were built, and those are the ones that we're using now. And I just kind of transitioned over from the diving world into ROVs because it was, a lot more opportunity in deeper water.
Awesome. And then if you wouldn't mind, I want to jump next to Kelly. And I'm hoping, Kelly, you can introduce us a little bit to how we've been using these ROVs on this particular mission to support restoration work.
Yeah, definitely. So you can see one of the ROVs that's on the ship right behind us here. This is actually not the one we're using on this mission. The one that we're using is probably about to go in the water to do some work. But these are work class ROVs. They're much bigger than what our teams are typically used to working with, and they're very capable. They typically are doing oil and gas industry work. So when we started working with this team on this mission and planning this mission, we started talking to them about the different science tools and instruments that we could add that are not sort of standard on these types of vehicles. So we added things like a suction sampler, which is basically a giant suction tube that can be used to sort of suck critters off of the seafloor into canisters that our teams can then use to sort of collect those individuals and study them. We added a really high resolution camera that faces down towards the seafloor so that we can take really incredible images of the sea floor as we're sort of transecting over, which I think Megan will get a chance to talk about in just a sec. Yeah, just lots of tools that we added, worked really hard with the team to get this vehicle ready to be a science machine, essentially, rather than an industry machine. And it's been a really exciting experience to work with them. And one just other thing to mention, sort of in addition to the science tools, sort of as you alluded to, these vehicles can also support all of the work that we're doing with the restoration divers. So a lot of this mission is focused around the work that we're doing with those divers. And I think one of our other live streams later this week, we'll talk a little bit more about that diving. But some of the major objectives have been installing mooring buoys and removing marine debris. And so those are objectives that the divers are primarily tasked with, but the ROVs have been a huge help because they can get to the site before the divers get in the water, scope things out, make sure everything's safe, just sort of get all the information we need to make sure the divers are getting into a situation where they can accomplish those tasks. So that's been really crucial. And then they've also actually helped us deploy some of the moorings as well. Some of the moorings we've used large weights on the bottom to sort of anchor them to the seafloor. And the ROV has been really crucial in helping to deploy those. So it's been, yeah, a very cool collaborative sort of joint effort between the science team, the ROV team, and the Navy diver team.
It sounds like there is a lot going on. And I want to jump real quick again to Jake. Jake, do you have a specific one of those missions or objectives that you think has been the most interesting?
Well, so far, helping deploy some of the larger buoys that the divers can't really swim with. The vehicles they're pretty capable. They can carry a lot of weight. And so we've been able to install some of these heavier buoys with more buoyancy on them than the divers can handle. And we can use our very specific spatially controlled arm to actually tie knots and put some shackles together and do some work that a lot of people didn't think we could do without human hands. So it's been pretty neat.
I'll add on to that really quick. Yeah, we've been trying to practice some of those knots ourselves, and even just with human hands, yeah, it is tricky. So the fact that 2 ROV arms can do it is amazing. And just to sort of provide a little more context as to why we're deploying those moorings and removing marine debris, it's all part of an effort to protect that seafloor habitat. So the idea is if we can get these moorings installed using, the skills of the Navy divers and the skills of our ROV team, folks will hopefully be less inclined to drop an anchor on the seafloor that might damage corals. So yeah, it's been really great to see the team come together and get these moorings installed, get the buoys installed so that, hopefully these areas are protected into the future.
That is awesome. It sounds like a win-win.
See one of these, I was going to say, you can see one of these pyramids being lowered here by the crane. Underwater, the ROV is working to sort of untie that, get it ready to be free. And then the crew on the deck tosses the buoy in, and then we have a new mooring.
I'm still stuck on the idea of trying to tie a knot from hundreds of feet away. But that is all so fantastic. And I want to jump also now to ask Kyler and Megan a little bit about how they are planning or have been using the ROV to do some of their research as well. Megan, can I start with you? We heard that these ROVs, one of the things that they're able to do is help us run transects. Can you give a little background of what a transect is and how does that help us better understand the habitat?
Yeah, of course, I'd love to. So transects are a really cool way to really get eyes on these seafloor habitats. So we're using the ROVs to get to a certain location that we have. We give GPS locations, and before we get down there, we don't know 100% what's going to be there. So the point of running this transect, is to get eyes on the ground, run a straight line. We are running 100-meter transects for our project, and the HAE team's also running about 300-meter transects for theirs. So we're just running a straight line at a constant depth or whatever the aim is here. And we're taking pictures as we go along. So we're taking about every 60 seconds, we're going to take a downward facing picture. And that really gives us a good snapshot of what the seafloor looks like. So we can quantify the abundance of those sponges, the corals, what we're looking at, and what that habitat is like. And that gives us a great chance to compare between sites when we could really put numbers on this and quantify what we're seeing down there.
And this is footage that we have right now of a transect they were running just on this mission, I think. That's great. And now I also
can see in that too. You had the forward facing. Sorry. I just wanted to mention you can see the 2 lasers in the screen there. That's how we're really seeing what distance we're looking at in these images as well. So it's cool that we have those lasers available on these images.
And then I also want to hear, I hear that we're also collecting samples from the ROV. Kyler, can you tell us a little bit about what these samples are and then what we can learn from these samples?
Yeah, so there's a lot we still don't know about what's living in the Gulf. So going down with the ROV and being able to take these samples, you can identify what some of these species are. And then we also are able to take water samples. And so we're using that to try and figure out what food is available in the water. And then we can take it a step further and see if there's specific species that are using specific sources of food to help them grow. And especially with the restoration efforts, we have several labs that are trying to propagate and grow these corals on land and then bring them back out. So knowing what food can be most effective at growing them is going to really help us move forward. And every time we send an ROV down and every time we get another sample, it's just more information that we can use to push this project forward.
And for some of us that might not be familiar, what sort of food are we talking about here? Or we're not talking about big fish, right?
No, we're definitely not.
Oh, well, one of the things about being at sea is that sometimes the internet is not always the most reliable. I think I just lost connection with our team here, right as we were about to get to the juicy stuff of what do corals eat. So we are going to work on this technical difficulty, I'm sorry, so you're stuck with me for the time being. But what I will say is I am currently calling you from land, but as of 2 days ago, I was also on board the island intervention. So I was actually there getting to see these 2 ROVs, and I can see some questions in the chat that these ROV samples are quite large, or the ROV is quite large, and that's true. There's a lot of really different types of ROVs, and these ones that we were working with are particularly large. That means that they can do quite a number of things. You can see we've got the arm over the side here of how they're deploying and retrieving this ROV. You heard mention about the bottles that they were using to collect water samples. Those Niskin bottles, we had about 9 of them set up on the side, and you can think of it almost like a really large, long Nalgene bottle that if you were to just screw on and take a water sample, then they're able to take that to the lab and look at all sorts of the little invertebrate or animals without a backbone critters that are in the water column. And even though a lot of this work is focused on the sea floor, you heard Kyler mention that the food that's in the water column is really important to the animals on the sea floor. The other thing we can do with the ROV is you heard about those ROV arms. There are 2 different types of arms. One is like a kind of the classic robotic arm that you can picture. And then the other one is actually really cool. It's super dexterous and it looks like when you watch it, like a human. And so when you're talking about doing the tying things, for example, underwater, picture like how hard it would be to hold like 2 pairs of scissors and try to like tie a knot together. But when you have those super malleable arms, it allows you to do much more. So one of the things that those ROV arms can do is they can take biological samples, like for example, a little sample of coral or rock, and they put it in these boxes that you can kind of see in the picture here, that then can come back to the surface and be used by scientists on board. And that's one of the really cool things too about this expedition is that you have so many different people on board. You have people, for example, from USGS who are taking sediment cores and sediment samples back to the lab. You have people from the Smithsonian who are looking at the invertebrates. I think I saw someone asking in the chat, what are the coolest invertebrates you find with the ROV? Now, I can say that I saw, and I'm so sad to miss this, this happened the day after I left. They did see an octopus, a small octopus on the ROV cam. We've seen all sorts of different species of coral. We do see a lot of fish, and I am partial to the fish, but they are not the invertebrates that you're asking about. We see some huge sponges that are able to filter the water, some of these big barrel sponges, which are really neat. So some of that is what you can see on the cam. And then when you take those little sediment samples, you can see even finer scale. So unfortunately, I can't answer the question about how a student can learn to operate an ROV. Hopefully, when we get back, we can ask that. Oh yeah, this is a cool footage of in the flower garden banks, which, as we mentioned, is a national marine sanctuary. And this area is protected. And one of the real interesting values of doing these restoration activities within the sanctuary is that even though these particular coral communities weren't affected by the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, they can serve as a reference habitat in order to or reference community so that we can compare how to better restore the injured areas as well. Oh, and we're back. Okay, as a just in time, because I'm sure everyone was getting tired of me just talking about the ROV. So let's jump right back in. We were on the edge of our seat. Kyler was going to tell us what kind of animals or what kind of food that you were looking for in the water column.
Yeah, so the part that I was specifically looking at with the corals is dissolved organic carbon. So within that, it could be amino acids, carbohydrates. So we're trying to see if there's anything specifically with that they might be eating. And then Megan also has some water samples that are looking at picoplankton populations. So it's still really small, but a little bit bigger than the dissolved organic carbon.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. I want to jump back. I'm seeing some questions in the chat, and here was one that I was definitely not able to answer. And I'm wondering, Jake, people are asking, where can one learn how to operate an ROV? What if you had someone that is in the beginning of their career or even still in school, what advice would you give them about how to pursue that career path?
Well, there's several different ways. There are ROV schools in the Gulf Coast area. There's some in Houston, Texas. I believe there's a few around the New Orleans area. A lot of companies like Sea Innovation, we have our own training department. So you can come and put in a resume and an application, and we will do on-the-job training. Well, we have a whole training program and course that we'll put everybody through before they get out to the vessels. And then once you get here, you get trained up by the guys that have been doing it for quite some time. Like me, I started doing this in 2004, and probably before some of you guys were even around, And here I am still.
We also see in the chat that apparently UNC Wilmington also has a special program for becoming an ROV pilot. So it sounds like there are a lot of really cool opportunities on the job and at different universities. Kelly, I have a question for you. So one of the things we talked about was that working within the Flower Garden Banks National Marine Sanctuary can actually be a really good reference community to look at communities that were injured by the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. And we have a question in the chat. Essentially, what are we seeing, this many years out from the oil spill? What is the status of the health of the coral ecosystems? And are we still seeing any damage?
Yeah, so I think it obviously depends where in the Gulf you go. Here in the Flower Gardens, as far as we know, there was no damage from the oil spill, as I think you said, Aaron. So yeah, it's really great to be out here and see this really thriving, healthy habitat. We did have a team on a different ship, the NOAA ship Nancy Foster, earlier this year, I think in March or April, and they were actually doing ROV surveys of the wreckage of the Deepwater Horizon drilling platform. And so we don't really have any concrete answers on sort of what the status is yet. We still need to take all the data they collected, all the video footage they collected, and sort of analyze it and draw conclusions from there. But it definitely, it's a lot deeper than where we currently are working. At the end of this expedition, we are planning to go to sites that are closer in depth to where the Deepwater Horizon wreckage is found. But yeah, we still have a lot of work to do to sort of take all this information, take everything we've learned and sort of figure out what it all means and what it all tells us about how the habitat is doing now, almost 14 years later.
And thank you, Kelly. And I was just thinking also, we had this little technical difficulty that happened in the live stream, which we talked about can happen when you're at sea, when you're in the middle of the ocean. And I think it would be also interesting to share if anyone has ideas of times you've had to troubleshoot something in the field. It can be related to the ROV or anything else, because I think anyone that has spent time in the field and especially out at sea knows that being able to adapt to challenges and troubleshoot things when they arise is a really important skill. So does anyone have any examples of that they can share? Did we lose it again, or is it just me? Because I feel like if that's the case, I almost jinxed us by bringing up troubleshooting at sea. Okay, well, I will give an example of a time I had to troubleshoot at sea, which is one time we set up an experiment where where everything was dependent on a computer, and we were all set up, and after 24 hours, someone accidentally knocked the computer into the ocean, and we couldn't run the experiment. And we were 24 hours away from the port. So after a moment of stunned silence, the guy in charge, my former boss, decided to look and see who else was available. Oh, good. I was just telling a story of the time that I had to troubleshoot at sea, where we knocked a computer in the ocean, and my boss had to go to a fancy yacht and ask them to borrow their internet. So
yeah, I think
any
we
other
heard your
troubleshooting?
question, and just as to
Okay.
answer, you went away. So I think we'll try to jump back in. Yeah, actually, I think something that's been really cool working with the ROV team is as they've sort of gotten more familiar with our science objectives, they've been really creative and things that they can sort of tweak or add to the ROV to help us with that. So we have a few folks from the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History on board with us, and they're trying to collect a very wide range of different invertebrates, different critters from the seafloor to take back to the museum and study. But a lot of them are sort of like stuck to the seafloor. And so if you just try to sort of grab them, they won't really come off. So there is now a spatula hanging on the ROV that the arm can grab and go use to sort of pry these critters off the seafloor to collect them. So we can, again, sort of as we've been talking about, get a better understanding of what species are down there. So that's been a really cool sort of teamwork, troubleshooting. How can we get these critters back on board with just, the things that we have available to us here on the ship? Because obviously we're pretty far and can't go to the store and buy new tools. So just make and do with what we have. And I think it's been pretty successful so far. We've gotten some really amazing samples. I don't know if y'all have any to add.
The question is, did you have to go to the kitchen and ask them for a spatula for deep sea
I think we did have to get permission. I don't think we just took that without asking. I think they had spares. So this one was allowed to come out to the ROV. Yeah, Keith, the chief steward, wants to keep track of his stuff, but he was kind enough to let us take one.
Any other stories? Because we have one more other question, but I don't want to cut anyone off from any good troubleshooting stories. So I want to, I know we're getting kind of low on time, and also I want you to know in the chat, there is a request for a picture of the spatula in the ROV, so we'll have to follow up on that. But I do want to end this in kind of in the spirit of communication. And, you were talking about what it's like as a scientist and as someone that's trying to reach these specific objectives or deploying a mooring buoy and whatnot. It requires a ton of communication and collaboration amongst all of these teams, many of which probably aren't located in the same place at the same time. So can someone talk a little bit about what that's like to be communicating across so many different teams, and also how you make that work?
Yeah, I can start off. Planning this mission was definitely a challenge because we were planning between sort of, like I said earlier, the science team, the Sea Innovation ship team, as well as the Navy team. But then even within that, there's sort of sub teams. So, Megan and Kyler are from UNCW, and they're just one sort of part of the science team. We also have the folks from the Smithsonian. We have folks from USGS. So I should know a list of the number of partners we've been working with off the top of my head, but it's hard to keep track. So yeah, it has been a lot of coordination and communication, but it is very cool because everyone, is working towards the same goal. And so I think everyone is very willing to make things work, sort of, get the spatula out of the kitchen, figure out how to get done what we need to get done, sort of no matter what troubleshooting and problem solving it takes. And I think that's been one of my favorite parts of this expedition is just seeing the different teams work together. And, I didn't know Jake before the last couple of weeks. And now I feel like we know the ROV team pretty well. We spend a lot of time. You can see the control room there on the screen. We spend a lot of time in there with them. So I think we all know each other pretty well at this point. And yeah, that's been a really fun part of this expedition.
And go ahead, Megan.
Yeah, I was just going to echo what Kelly has said, and it's really amazing to see how Kelly's organized all of this communication as well, because being outside university partners, there's a lot for us to learn of being part of this mission and being prepared and knowing the right things to do. So Kelly's really been awesome at being able to communicate that, and also just like the excitement and the enthusiasm for these projects. So if you have a goal, everybody's just figuring out, okay, what can we do to make that happen? Where can we get these Niskin bottles from? Where can we get the downward lasers from across our partners to make these objectives happen, which has been really amazing to be a part of, especially at the university level coming from UNCW.
Yeah, I think pulling all the different tools together for the ROV that we're using, some were shipped from Washington, D.C., some were driven in from Mississippi, some were shipped from New York. Like it really was like a cross-continental effort to get that ROV, all the science tools we needed to do this really amazing restoration work. So yeah, very cool to see it all come together. Oh my gosh, someone has brought us the spatula.
Oh, the famous spatula. And it genuinely
the famous
is.
Spatula.
We can confirm a spatula.
Can confirm. This loop hangs on the ROV, and yeah, then the clock can grab it and go scoop up some critters.
For use in the kitchen and mesophotic and deep benthic habitats. And speaking of that, I just want to also wrap this up and ask kind of two things. You can answer one or both, which is, remind us how this work is supporting restoration of deep sea coral habitats in the Gulf, and also what gives you hope as you are going through this work about the future of the habitats?
Yeah, I can kick us off. So this mission in particular is really cool. The 4 projects that Erin talked about at the beginning that all sort of have unique goals that help us restore these habitats, they're all represented on this mission. There's something we're doing on this mission that sort of feeds into all of those projects, whether it's installing these mooring buoys to protect the seafloor, conducting transects to learn more about what we find on the seafloor, the species and the types of habitats, and then the corals that some of our teams are collecting to learn more about how they grow, how they reproduce, and if we're able to sort of fragment them and propagate them to help more of them grow. So all of that work that's happening on board is really feeding into that restoration. And then I think in terms of what gives me hope, something that I've really enjoyed is, again, working with the ROV team and seeing how excited they are about what we're doing. And maybe you can speak to this, but it sounds like this has been very different than what the work that they typically do is. I think they've gotten to look at a lot more exciting fish and other critters than they typically get to on their sort of oil and gas industry jobs. So seeing their enthusiasm for sort of discovering how amazing these habitats are just really shows like what an impact it can have to connect people with these habitats. So we hope, people tuning into these live streams get that sense of, sort of wonder when they see these habitats, and then all of the video footage and things that we bring back from this mission will help us connect to other folks back on shore as well. So just sort of seeing that excitement and just joy at these incredible habitats once folks realize they're there is really, gives me a lot of hope that we can bring that to more people.
Yeah, I think speaking from our point of view and coming from like the industrial side, the oil and gas side, and doing a lot more science work with this group, we work in this environment every single day and we don't know very much about it. And this gives us an opportunity to really see the environment that we're working in and how everything affects it and what we can do to help with moving everything forward with preservation and learning for everybody else. So it's been a pretty cool experience for all of us.
The level of collaboration really gives me hope for a lot of these projects, as Kelly was saying, just seeing how everybody brings their individual expertise to this project. And then also having opportunities like this to communicate with all of you guys back home to really bring this to different areas, because it's really rare to have the opportunity to get out in the Gulf, be at the flower gardens here, learn more about these habitats. But being able to talk to you guys back there and have people engaged with what we're doing has been really cool and exciting.
And I'll just say for me, what gives me hope is just that we're always learning more and there's always more to do. And there's just a lot of levels to this that we can continue to pursue, and a lot of different avenues that maybe weren't even thought about at the start of this, that we can hopefully figure out the best way to restore this habitat.
Well, I think that's a beautiful way to wrap up. Thank you all so much for your time. I know it's really busy out there, but really appreciate you sharing a little bit more about your work. And for everyone who's tuned in, thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed today's event, please feel free to spread the word, because we have a lot of other really interesting live streams that are coming throughout the course of this expedition. We're going to be talking about the saturation divers. We're going to be talking about women in marine science. We're going to be talking about all kinds of things. So we do have a schedule that they're going to share in the chat. We have a couple left, and so you have plenty more time, and then stay tuned for some more later this year. And to also learn more about the projects, there is a link that has been pasted in the chat where you can read up about more of this work, not just on this expedition, but throughout other trips in the Gulf of Mexico. And lastly, if you wouldn't mind, we would love it if you could please complete a little feedback form so that can help us have make these even better moving forward. But with that, we'll say thank you all so much for tuning in, and hopefully we will see you again soon. Good luck, guys.